I accepted a contract to catalog a dying man's estate. The terms were quite specific. The payment was exceptionally generous. It required a 6-week commitment on site. My name is Alara Vance. I am an archival researcher by profession. I prefer order to chaos. I find comfort in cataloging the past. Arthur Finch's lawyer contacted me online. The request seemed straightforward then. They needed a complete inventory of Finch House. The homeowner was terminally ill. The man wanted everything documented before he died. I was told he was reclusive. I arrived in Maine on a cool autumn morning. The coastal air tasted of salt. My rented cottage was a small, modern box. It felt temporary and sterile. Finch House was a 20-minute drive away. It appeared suddenly from the pine trees. The Victorian mansion stood against the gray sky. It seemed untouched by modern times. I parked on the crushed shell driveway. My footsteps sounded loud in the quiet. The front door was heavy oak with a brass knocker. I lifted it and let it fall. The sound echoed inside. Several moments passed in complete silence. Then the door opened inward. Arthur Finch stood in the dim foyer. He was frailer than I expected. His posture remained carefully erect. He wore a simple cardigan and slacks. His eyes were a pale, watery blue. "You must be Miss Vance," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. "Please come in. We have business to discuss." I stepped into the foyer. The air inside was still and warm. It held the scent of old wood and beeswax. Time felt different here. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Finch," I said. He gave a slow, slight nod. He gestured for me to follow him. We did not go far. He led me to a small sitting room. A fire crackled softly in the grate. 2 leather chairs faced each other. On a table between them sat a folder. Next to it was a single pen. "Please sit," he instructed. I took the chair opposite him. He lowered himself into his chair with care. He studied me for a moment. "You have reviewed the initial agreement," he stated. It was not a question. I confirmed that I had. He opened the folder on the table. "These are the house rules. They are non-negotiable additions." He slid the top sheet toward me. The paper was crisp and new. I picked it up. The typing was in a large, classic font. "Rule 1," it began. "You must reside in the house." I looked up at him. "Live here." My understanding was daytime work. "The inventory requires full immersion," he said calmly. "Your cottage rental will be refunded." Rule 2. You may not remove any item, not even temporarily. Rule 3. Report any discovery of a specific blue ledger immediately. I read the last line again. It mentioned a specific book. "What does this ledger look like?" I asked him. "You will know it," he answered. His tone offered no detail. "These rules are for your protection, Miss Vance, as much as mine." I felt a slight chill then. The fire's warmth did not reach it. "Why does this need protection?" I asked carefully. "Documenting a life is a delicate process. Some doors are better left closed." He pointed to the second page. It was the formal contract. My signature was required on both documents. The payment figure was written again. It was more money than I had ever been offered. It could change my life. It would cover my sister's law school loans. It would give me freedom. I thought of the sterile cottage. I looked around the warm room. "All utilities will be provided," Arthur Finch added softly. "The house is fully stocked. You will want for nothing." I took the pen from the table. It was a solid, heavy object. I signed my name on both documents. The ink was a deep blue. He witnessed my signature with a slow nod. He did not smile. "Your room is prepared upstairs, the first door on the right. Begin your work in the study tomorrow. Start with the desk." He rose from his chair with effort. Our meeting was clearly concluded. I stood as well. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Finch." "Do not thank me yet," he said. His pale eyes held mine. "The house has many stories. Your job is to list the pages." He turned and left the room. I was alone with the crackling fire. I collected my suitcase from my car. The shell driveway crunched under my feet. The front door was still open. The house seemed to swallow daylight. I found the staircase in the main hall. The steps creaked under my weight. The first door on the right was unlocked. I stepped into my new room. It was spacious and simply furnished. A large bed stood against one wall. A writing desk sat by the window. It overlooked the back garden. My suitcase looked foreign on the rug. I unpacked into the empty dresser. The process took only minutes. I had brought very little with me. I sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was a physical presence. This was my first contradiction. I was living in a client's home. It was a professional boundary crossed, yet the contract justified it. I decided to explore the main floor. I needed to understand my workspace. The study was easy to find. Its double doors were off the main hall. I switched on the light. A green glass lamp glowed on the desk. The room was lined with dark bookshelves. They were filled with leather-bound volumes. The desk was clean and orderly. It held a blotter and an inkwell. It felt like a stage set. Nothing was out of place. I opened the top drawer on the right side. It contained office supplies. Pens, paper clips, a ruler. Nothing of immediate interest. The left-hand drawer was locked. That was expected on my first day. I noticed the floorboards near the desk were worn. One board seemed slightly higher. I pressed the edge of it with my toe. It gave a faint creak. I knelt down for a closer look. The board was not nailed down securely. I worked my fingers into the narrow gap. I lifted the board carefully. A small, dark space lay beneath it. It was empty except for one thing. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against brittle paper. I pulled out a single folded letter. The paper was fragile and yellowed. The handwriting was elegant and flowing. It was addressed to my dearest Clara. The date at the top read October 12, 1923. The signature was simply J. It was a love letter, full of tender promises. Clara was not Arthur's mother. I knew his mother's name was Alina. This was a hidden secret. This was my first document, a private heartache under the floor. I carefully placed the letter back. I lowered the floorboard over it. My heart was beating faster. This was not just an inventory job. I was cataloging secrets. Arthur Finch knew they were here. He wanted them found, but he did not want a point. I left the study and found the kitchen. It was a large, old-fashioned room. A note sat on the farmhouse table. It was in the same typed font. "Provisions are in the pantry. Help yourself to anything. AF." I opened the large pantry door. Shelves were fully stocked. There were soups, crackers, tea, and coffee. Everything was simple and high quality. On the counter sat a modern electric kettle, a relief in this old house. I made a cup of tea. The simple routine grounded me. I took my tea to the sitting room. The fire had died to embers. On the mantel, I noticed a folded pamphlet. It had not been there earlier. I picked it up. It was for St. Bridget's Hospice and Palliative Care. A brochure about end-of-life support services. It was clean and recent. A phone number was handwritten on the front. It was not Arthur's handwriting. This was my second document. It contradicted his arrangement. He was supposed to be receiving home care. This hinted at a different plan. Why would a hospice pamphlet be here? Was he planning to leave? The quiet of the house deepened. I finished my tea in the silence. I went upstairs to my assigned room. The hallway was long and dark. I closed my bedroom door. The lock clicked with a solid sound. I changed into my nightclothes. The bed was firm and comfortable. Sleep did not come quickly. The house settled with groans. I listened to the unfamiliar sounds. I thought about the blue ledger. What story did it contain? Why was it so important? I finally drifted into a light sleep. A sharp knock woke me later. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m. I sat up in bed. "Who is it?" I called out. My voice sounded thin. There was no answer from the hallway, only the continued silence. I got out of bed. I walked to the door and listened. I heard nothing on the other side. I slowly turned the doorknob. I opened the door just a crack. The hallway was empty and dark. A single object lay on the floor. It was a small, framed photograph. It was a picture of this house. It showed it decades ago. A woman stood on the porch. She was smiling at the camera. I picked up the frame. I brought it back into my room. I studied the woman's face. She had Arthur's pale, intelligent eyes. This was a power shift. Someone had entered my space. They left a message without words. They could reach me here. I placed the photograph on the desk. I did not sleep again. The morning light was a welcome relief. It softened the room's edges. I dressed in practical clothing. Today I would begin the official work. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I made coffee and ate toast. I returned to the study. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. I started with the bookshelf left of the desk. I began listing titles. Most were historical texts and literature. The collection was thoughtful and broad. After an hour, I needed a break. I walked to the front window. A woman was standing across the street. She was watching Finch House. She held a gardening trowel. She made no pretense of looking away. I met her gaze through the window. She gave a small, sharp wave. This was my first external contact. I decided to go outside. The crisp air felt good. I walked across the quiet street. "Hello," I said. "I'm Alara Vance. I'm working for Mr. Finch." The woman looked me up and down. She was in her 70s. "I'm Genevieve Clark. I live here. We don't get many newcomers." "What kind of work are you doing?" she asked directly. "An inventory of the house contents," I answered. It was the simple truth. Her expression tightened slightly. "An inventory? That sounds final." "He's ensuring everything is in order," I said neutrally. "Is that what he told you?" She gave a short sigh. "He's been alone for years, since his mother passed. He keeps to himself, except for the nurses, of course." I noted her word choice. Nurses, implying more than one. "Has he been ill for long?" I asked politely. "Long enough," Mrs. Clark said. She changed the subject. "You're staying in the house, I see. Your car hasn't moved." I confirmed that I was. It was part of the contract. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. "Be careful in that place. It has a history. Not all of it is in the past." She turned back to her flower bed. Our conversation was over. "It was nice to meet you," I said. She merely nodded, already digging. I walked back across the street. Her warning lingered in the air. It was more intrigue from my list. I returned to the study. I focused on the lower bookshelves. A large, flat art book was shoved behind others. I pulled it out. It was a volume on European portrait painting. It seemed out of place. I opened the front cover. A business card was tucked inside. It was not a bookmark. It was placed there intentionally. The card was for Anya Petrova. Her title was Art Restitution Investigator. She was based in London. This was my third document. Why did Arthur have this card? What art needed restitution? I slipped the card back into the book. I recorded the title. The entry felt significant. I was cataloging clues, not just objects. My stomach reminded me it was lunchtime. I went back to the kitchen. As I made a sandwich, I saw it. A note on the fridge. Library hours, 10:42 sat. The initial L meant nothing. It was another suggestion, a gentle push toward town. I decided to follow it. I needed a break from the silence. The Cedar Cove Library was a quaint stone building. It smelled of old paper. A young man sat at the circulation desk. He wore round glasses. He looked up as I entered. "Can I help you find something?" I'm new in town, I said. I'm working at Finch House. His expression changed. It became more guarded but interested. I'm Leo. I handle the local history archives here. Arthur Finch mentioned you might visit. He said you'd have questions. This was a revelation. Arthur had anticipated my move. He had paved a path for me. I was following his design. I'm just starting my research, I told Leo. Anything you can share helps. Leo nodded slowly. He led me to a back room. It was filled with filing cabinets and maps. He pulled out a drawer. These are the original property deeds, he explained. He found a document. The deed was from 1898. It described the boundaries in legal language. I noticed a clause about mineral rights. It mentioned a right-of-way. This right-of-way was disputed. It involved the neighboring plot. That plot held the Atlantic Maritime Museum. This was my fourth document. A historical land dispute. It could explain tension. Was this ever resolved? I asked Leo. Not legally, he said quietly. The Finch family always allowed access. It was a gentleman's agreement. Those can be fragile things. I thanked him for his help. I checked out a local history book. I drove back to Finch House. The day was already growing dim. I parked and walked to the front door. Something felt different. The door was slightly ajar. I had locked it when I left. I pushed it open slowly. The foyer was empty and still. Mr. Finch, I called out. No answer came. I walked into the sitting room. Arthur Finch was in his leather chair. He was staring at the cold fireplace. He looked even more frail. You left the door unlocked, I said softly. He turned his head toward me. His movement was slow and pained. No, my dear, I used my key. I am still the homeowner. This was a power shift. He had reasserted his control. He was reminding me of my place. I was a guest. I was checking on your progress, he stated. The study looks undisturbed. I'm following a systematic approach, I replied, starting with the bookshelves. Good, system is good. He looked back at the fireplace. Did you find anything of interest today? He asked. His tone was casual. I decided to test the waters. I found a lovely old art book. He showed no reaction. My mother enjoyed painting. Many books remain. I then mentioned the deed. I visited the library. The history is fascinating. Now he turned fully. His pale eyes focused on me intently. The past is not always a friend. Some deeds are best left buried. The double meaning was clear. He was warning me off. My job is to document, I reminded him, not to interpret. A faint smile touched his lips. Documentation is interpretation. You will see. He struggled to stand. I instinctively moved to help him. He waved me away. I am capable for a little while longer. He walked to the foyer. He took his coat from the stand. I will leave you to your work. Remember the rules. He opened the front door. The cold afternoon light framed him. The blue ledger is the key. Everything else is just the frame. He stepped outside and closed the door. I was alone once more. His visit left me unsettled. He was a man racing death. He was also laying a trail. I was meant to follow it. I went upstairs to change. I needed a moment to think. I opened my dresser drawer. My clothes were not as I left them. They were folded differently, neater, with military precision. Someone had been in my room. They had handled my things. This was another violation, a clear message of surveillance. I felt a surge of anger, then it cooled into resolve. This was part of the test. Arthur was observing my reaction. I would not give him alarm. I simply refolded a sweater. I went back downstairs. I decided to explore another room. The formal dining room was next to the study. I opened its doors. A long mahogany table dominated the space. 12 chairs surrounded it. A china cabinet held delicate porcelain. The walls were dark green wallpaper. One wall looked different. The wallpaper seemed newer there. The pattern matched, but the color was brighter. I walked closer. I ran my hand over the surface. I felt ridges underneath. They were long, vertical lines, and squares at regular intervals. This was not just a wall. This was a covered wall. The ridges were the edges of frames. Paintings had once hung here. Someone had wallpapered over them. They had sealed the portraits away. Why hide family portraits? What was on those canvases? This was my fifth document, a hidden gallery of faces. I needed to talk to someone outside this puzzle. I called my sister Vicky in Seattle. It was still afternoon there. She answered on the second ring. "Ilara, how's the mansion cataloging?" Her voice was a welcome anchor. I told her about the rules. I described the hidden letter. I mentioned the wallpapered wall. "That's intensely weird, Elle," she said. She was a practical lawyer. "But the contract is solid. The payment is legally binding. He can set the terms. The living situation is odd, but not illegal. Do you feel unsafe?" I considered her question. "No, not unsafe. Watched." "He's a sick old man," Vicky reasoned. "He's controlling what he can. His world is shrinking. You're now part of it." Her logic was a relief wave. It grounded the strange. "Just keep doing your job," she advised. "Document everything, take photos. Create your own record. That's your power in this." We talked a few minutes more, then I hung up. I felt better after our call. Vicky was my tether. I made a simple dinner. I ate at the large table alone. Afterwards, I returned to the study. I wanted to examine the locked drawer. I had avoided it earlier. Now I felt a need to progress. The lock was a simple, old one. It might not be secure. I looked for a key in other drawers. I found nothing useful. I then noticed the desk structure. The center drawer had a panel. I pressed along the panel's bottom edge. A small piece shifted. A thin, flat key was taped there. It was cleverly hidden. This was my sixth document, a secret key. I pulled the key free. It was cold in my hand. I fitted into the drawer's lock. It turned with a click. I pulled the heavy drawer open. It was deep and full. On top lay a recent bank statement. I should not have looked. My eyes fell on the transactions anyway. It was an invasion. Regular, large withdrawals were listed. Each was $5,000. They occurred on the 1st of every month. The destination was the same. The recipient was the Atlantic Maritime Museum, listed as a donation. This was consistent philanthropy, but the amount was strikingly high. Why give so much to a museum, one they once disputed with? This was the seventh reveal. Money was flowing out. I closed the drawer and locked it. I replaced the key. My heart was pounding. I was crossing professional lines. Yet the contract demanded full immersion. This felt like part of it. The darkness outside was now complete. The house felt larger. I decided to retire. I took the history book with me. I read for an hour in bed. The words blurred. A sound made me look up. It was a soft shuffle. It came from the hallway. Then it stopped by my door. I held my breath. No knock came. Something slid under the door. A single sheet of paper. I waited for the sound to retreat. Silence returned. I got out of bed. I picked up the paper. It was a photocopied article. The date was 1972. The headline read, "Local heiress donates rare collection." The heiress was a leaner. Arthur's mother donated nautical charts to the very museum. This was the eighth reveal. The donations were a tradition. But it felt like a plea, evidence left for me. Someone was helping me, or guiding me. I placed the article on my desk. I lay back down. The house was full of whispers. I was just beginning to listen. The next morning, I awoke to clear, cold light. I felt a new resolve. I would follow every thread systematically. I was a researcher. not a detective. My job was to list the pages. I would list every single one. I started with the bank statement in my mind. The donations were a clear pattern. I needed to verify them externally. I drove to the Atlantic Maritime Museum. It was a modern glass building. It hugged the historic coastline. The curator was a nervous man named Mr. Driscoll. His handshake was damp. "Arthur Finch has been a generous benefactor," he confirmed, "for many years. His mother began the tradition. He has continued it with dedication." I asked about the nature of the donations. Were they all monetary gifts? Mr. Driscoll's eyes flickered away. Primarily monetary, for preservation. Occasionally, he gifts an artifact, something from the family's holdings. He was being deliberately vague. I pressed him gently. "I'm cataloging the estate. I need to understand provenance. If things were gifted here, they shouldn't be on my list." He nodded rapidly. "Yes, of course, that makes sense." He led me to a computer terminal. He pulled up a donor record. The screen showed a list of gifts. The most recent was 2 weeks ago. This was my 9th document, a digital record of recent activity. The entry was for personal effects. It was listed as miscellaneous papers. The date was after I signed my contract. Arthur was still donating. He was dispersing his estate while alive, while paying me to catalog it. This was a direct contradiction. It felt like a performance. Were these papers of historical value? I asked Mr. Driscoll. "All history has value," he said evasively, "to the right researcher." He logged off the computer quickly. The screen went dark. "Thank you for your time." I offered my hand again. He shook it limply. "My regards to Mr. Finch. We await his final instructions." The phrase chilled me. Final instructions. It sounded terminal. I left the museum and sat in my car. The ocean was gray. Arthur Finch was actively emptying his house, but he wanted a record. This paradox was my job's core. I was creating a ghost image. I decided to visit St. Bridget's Hospice next. The pamphlet demanded attention. The facility was 30 minutes inland. It was a serene, single-story building. Gardens surrounded it, even in autumn. The silence here was peaceful. I approached the front desk. A nurse with a kind face looked up. "I'm here regarding Arthur Finch," I said. "I'm assisting with his estate." Her expression softened. "Oh, Mr. Finch, of course. He's not a resident. He's an outpatient for pain management. He comes weekly for Dr. Chen. He's a gentle soul." This was new information. He was receiving treatment, not full care. "Is Dr. Chen available for a question?" I asked politely. "Regarding care plans, for the inventory." The nurse checked a schedule. "He has a moment soon." She directed me to a waiting area. I sat on a sofa. I noticed lockers along one wall. They were for patients' effects. The numbers ranged from 100 to 150. I remembered the desk key. The tag had said, "St. Bridget's, Locker 114. My hand went to my pocket. I had brought the key with me. A researcher is always prepared. When the nurse looked away, I stood. I walked to the lockers. I found number 114. It was at waist height. I glanced around the quiet hall. No one was watching. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with perfect ease. The metal door opened inward. Inside was a standard envelope. It was not sealed. I lifted the flap and peered. I saw a set of medical files. The top page had Arthur's name. I should not have taken them, but the key was left for me. I slipped the envelope into my tote bag. I closed the locker. I returned as a man approached. He wore a white coat. "I'm Dr. Chen," he said. "Questions about Arthur Finch." He was young and looked tired. His eyes were attentive. "Yes, for estate logistics," I said. "Timing is important." "I understand," he said. "His prognosis is stable with care. He manages his pain well. His mind is remarkably clear. Is he able to travel? I asked. It was reasonable. Dr. Chen paused. Travel is not advised, but he is ambulatory. He takes occasional outings. They are important for his mental state. This was the 10th reveal. Arthur's outings were medical exceptions. He could leave his house. He could go anywhere. I thanked Dr. Chen for his time. I left the hospice quickly. I drove to a quiet park. I needed to examine the files. I pulled the envelope from my bag. The records were detailed. They listed Arthur's degenerative condition. The timeline was clearly outlined. Appointment notes were meticulous. Then I saw the contradiction. A projected timeline included a date. It was for next month. The lawyer's letter hinted he had weeks. This granted more time. This was the 11th document, a hidden timeline. Arthur had more time than implied. This was a staged urgency. Why the pretense? To expedite my work, to create pressure. I put the files back. A separate, smaller paper fluttered out. It was a receipt from a freight company. It was dated 3 days ago. The shipment was from Finch House. It went to a storage facility. The facility number was listed. Its location was another state. This was the 12th reveal. Items were being shipped far away. The museum donation was a distraction. The real movement was elsewhere. I felt a surge of frustration. I was seeing a shadow play. I returned to Finch House. The afternoon was already waning. I needed to see the receipt's origin. I searched for more clues. I looked for shipping manifests. I found nothing in the desk. I moved to the kitchen. I checked the trash bin. It was empty and clean. Too clean, recently emptied. I remembered the attic. I had not ventured up there. The access was in the hallway. It was a pull-down ladder. I tugged on the cord. The ladder unfolded with a groan. I climbed into the dim space. A single bulb hung. I pulled the chain. The light was weak but sufficient. The attic was not full of junk. It was organized. Stacked against one wall were wooden crates. They were identical. About a dozen sat there. Each was closed with latches. None were nailed shut. I lifted a latch. The crate was empty inside. It was lined with archival foam. Custom-cut shapes were visible. They were shapes for specific objects. Rectangles of various sizes, some large, some small. These were custom shipping crates, for artwork or delicate artifacts. They were all empty. The shapes held only air. This was the 13th reveal, a gallery of empty shells. I closed the crate gently. My mind raced. Had the art ever been here, or was it always elsewhere? I noticed flat packages in the corner. They were wrapped in paper. I unwrapped the edge of one. Underneath was a picture frame. An empty picture frame. It was ornate and gilded. I unwrapped another. It was also an empty frame. A third, a fourth. All were empty antique frames. They matched the hidden ridges. This was their resting place. The paintings were gone. The frames were preserved. Why keep the frames? Sentiment seemed unlikely. This felt like evidence preservation. The frames proved existence. I heard a noise below. The front door opened. I froze in the attic. Footsteps moved through the house. They were not Arthur's slow steps. These were lighter. I climbed down the ladder quietly. I folded it up. I walked downstairs, trying to appear normal. Mrs. Clark stood in the foyer. She held another casserole dish. She looked at me sharply. "You were in the attic," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I'm cataloging the entire house," I replied. "As per my contract. That attic hasn't been used in years, not since Alina died." "What did you find up there?" Her tone was direct. "Empty storage crates, some old frames." I kept it factual. A strange look passed over her face. It was sadness and satisfaction. "Empty, I thought they might be. She handed me the dish. Arthur is a complicated man. His mother was complicated. They lived with many ghosts. Some were on canvas. She turned to leave again. Then she paused. That young man was here today, while you were out. My breath caught. What young man? The nervous one. From the museum, I think. He visits often. He carries a briefcase. He never stays very long. This was the 14th reveal. A mysterious courier. Arthur was not isolated. He had a secret visitor. I thanked Mrs. Clark for the information, and for the casserole. She left without another word. I placed the dish in the kitchen. I needed to speak to Leo again. The librarian knew town rhythms. The library was closing soon. I drove there quickly. Leo was shelving books. He seemed unsurprised to see me. The nervous young man from the museum, I began. Do you know him? Leo adjusted his glasses. That would be Peter Driscoll. The curator's nephew. He does special deliveries for his uncle. And for Mr. Finch, it seems, for months. What kind of deliveries? I asked, keeping my voice low. Small things, flat packages usually, like documents. Never boxes, just envelopes, Leo shrugged. This matched the freight receipt. Small items were being shipped. But the attic crates were large, for big canvases. 2 processes were happening. I saw only one trail. I asked about the storage facility, the one on the receipt. He hadn't heard of it. He suggested checking business registrations. I used the library's public computer. I searched the facility. It was high security, climate-controlled storage. It specialized in fine art. The company was based in Delaware. It served international clients. This was the 15th document, a professional art storage solution. Arthur was not just donating locally. He was using a world-class service. The pieces formed a mosaic, not a simple picture. I printed the information and left. Dusk settled over town. I felt deep unease. I also felt intense curiosity. I called Vicky when I got back. I needed her legal mind. I explained the empty frames. I mentioned the storage facility. Alara, this is getting deep, she said. Her voice was serious. It sounds like asset dispersal, before a legal event. But the secrecy is unusual, unless there's litigation. Have you checked for any lawsuits? They'd be public record. I hadn't thought of that. It was a brilliant suggestion. How do I do that? I asked her. I can run a quick search, she said. Give me the full name. Arthur James Finch, and the estate name. I gave her all the details. I heard typing. I'll look tonight and call tomorrow, she promised. Be careful. You're just the cataloger. Remember that. Don't get in over your head. I promised her I would. We ended the call. Her warning echoed. I was already in deep. I ate some of Mrs. Clark's casserole. It was good. After dinner, I forced myself to work. I continued the bookshelf inventory. On a high shelf, I found a yearbook. It was from a Swiss school. Arthur's youthful photo stared out. He looked serious. The book fell open to a page. A photo was tucked inside. It was the same gallery interior, the pre-war Viennese gallery. This was the original photograph. It was black and white. On the back was elegant script. Mutter's favorite place, E. Mutter was German for mother. This was Aliner's favorite place. The gallery was in Vienna. She had a European connection. This was the 16th reveal, a tangible link. I placed the photo in a sleeve. I logged it. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. I jumped. I went to the front door. No one was there. A manila envelope lay on the porch. It had my name typed. I brought it inside. I opened the envelope. It contained a single sheet, a passenger ship manifest. The date was 1948. The list included Aliner V. Finch. And infant, male Finch. Arthur and his mother arrived in America. They were immigrants. This was the 17th document. They came from Europe after the war, with very little. The manifest listed 2 suitcases. The attic crates told a different story. Art was shipped separately or acquired later. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It read, "Check the garden shed, the small one." I did not reply. Who was sending clues? I put on my coat. I took a flashlight. I walked to the overgrown garden. A small shed stood there. The padlock was broken. I pulled the door open. The smell of damp soil greeted me. Inside were garden tools. I shone my light into corners. Something gleamed under a sack. I moved the sack aside. It was a small metal strongbox. It was not locked. I lifted the lid. Inside were more photographs and a small, leather-bound journal. The photos showed paintings, portraits, and landscapes. Each photo had a number on the back, in a feminine hand. The journal listed the same numbers. Next to them were names. The names were European. The dates were in the 1930s. This was an inventory of a collection, a missing collection. This was the 18th reveal, a secret catalog. I heard a twig snap outside. I turned off my flashlight. I stood perfectly still in the dark. My heart pounded. Silence, only the wind. I waited for minutes. I turned the light back on. I took the journal and photographs. I replaced the strongbox. I hurried back to the house. I locked the kitchen door. I spread the photos on the table. The paintings were beautiful. The journal entries were in German. I understood fragments. Words like Erwerb and Sammlung appeared. Also Sicherung. Sicherung meant security or safeguarding. It was neutral. I used my phone to translate lines. The grammar was formal. It recorded the movement of items, not purchase, but transfer. A cold understanding began. This was not a simple collection. This was a record of provenance, a troubled one. I photographed every page. I photographed every painting. I returned the originals to the strongbox. I would return them. I needed to keep this secret, even from the house. That night, I slept with my door barricaded, a chair under the knob. No one came. No notes were slid under. Morning arrived, gray and damp. I felt exhausted but clear. Vicky called early. Her voice was tight. I found the lawsuit, a civil case in New York. It's against the Finch family estate, not Arthur personally. The plaintiffs are distant relatives, from a European branch. They contest asset dispersal. They claim rightful heirship. This was the 19th reveal, a legal challenge. What assets? I asked, my throat dry. That's the thing, Vicky said. The filing is vague. It mentions cultural property, movable assets of disputed provenance. They're not suing for money. They're suing for ownership. Arthur is dispersing things before they can be claimed. This changed everything. I was not just making an inventory. I was creating a legal document, a record of absence. My inventory would show empty frames, a house already emptied. I was Arthur's impartial witness, his alibi for missing art. Be careful with your documentation, Vicky warned. It could be subpoenaed. Your neutrality is your shield. Record what you see. I thanked her and hung up. My hands trembled slightly. I made a pot of strong coffee. I needed to think. Arthur was not a thief. He was a restitutor. He was returning things before he died, before legal tangles. The lawsuit explained the secrecy. It explained the staged urgency. But it didn't explain his methods. Why the game with me? Why not just tell the truth? I pondered this. The answer came slowly. He needed deniability. If I knew, I could be compelled. My documentation could be biased. This way, I was simply a professional, doing a job. I was discovering clues he left. He never directly informed me. My findings were my own. That was legally protected. It was a brilliant strategy. I was a pawn in a noble game. I decided to play my part. I would be the perfect cataloger. I would document with sterile precision. I would follow every clue. I returned the journal to the garden shed. I placed it exactly. I resumed work in the study. I moved to lower cabinets. Behind old maps, I found a portfolio. It was zipped shut. I unzipped it carefully. Inside were architectural drawings. They were plans for Finch House, from 1890. A later page showed a 1949 renovation, just after Alina arrived. It added a room, a small windowless room off the study. It was labeled Strong Room. On current plans, it did not exist. It had been walled over, or hidden. This was the 20th reveal, a hidden room. I searched the study walls for seams. The bookshelves were fixed. I began removing books from one section. The shelf felt solid. I pushed and pulled on the woodwork. Nothing gave way. Then I noticed the fireplace. The study had a large one. The mantel was deep. I examined the brickwork. One brick near the floor looked different. The mortar was cleaner. I pressed the brick with my thumb. It didn't move. I pushed it upward. It slid up with a gritty sound. Behind it was a small metal lever. I pulled it sideways. A soft click came from the bookshelf. The unit shuddered. It was not a door. A section swung inward. It revealed a dark, narrow passage. The air was cold. I had found the strong room. My heart hammered. This was a major escalation. I crossed a new threshold. I fetched my flashlight. I pointed the beam inside. The passage was short. It led to a closet-sized room. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. Not even dust remained. It was cleaned recently. But on the back wall, a hook was screwed. A tag hung. The tag had a handwritten number. It matched the freight receipt. This was the 21st reveal, a staging ground. Items had been stored here, then moved to attic crates, then shipped to storage. The trail was clear. The room itself was the final document, an empty space. I backed out. I closed the bookshelf door. It clicked shut, seamless. I replaced the books. I reset the brick and lever. The study looked undisturbed. I had seen the mechanism. I understood the physical truth. The art had been here. Now it was gone. My inventory was a record of absence. That was its purpose. The doorbell rang again. I composed myself and answered. It was the young man, Peter Driscoll. He looked nervous. "Miss Vance, a package for you from Mr. Thorne." He handed me a thick envelope. His hand shook. "Thank you," I said. He nodded and ran to his car. I opened the envelope in the foyer. It was from Marcus Thorne. It was a formal letter. It acknowledged my independent role. It reiterated confidentiality clauses. It included a notarized affidavit. I was to sign and return it. It stated no coercion. It stated I had free access. It was a legal safeguard. This was the 22nd document, protection for us both. Included was a return envelope and a check for my first installment. The amount was substantial. It was half the fee. I signed the affidavit. I placed it in the return envelope. I would mail it today. I was now legally entrenched. I felt a strange calm. The game's boundaries were defined. I was an official witness. My observations had legal weight. I had power now, a quiet, documentary power. I decided to take a break. I drove to the post office. I mailed the affidavit to New York. The act felt final. On my way back, I passed St. Bridget's. Arthur was outside. He sat in a wheelchair on the path. Dr. Chen stood beside him. They were deep in conversation. Arthur gestured with a frail hand. I pulled over to watch. I should not have. Dr. Chen handed Arthur a pill bottle. Arthur placed it in his coat. Then Arthur handed Dr. Chen an envelope. It was thick. Dr. Chen took it and nodded. He placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. This was a power shift. The doctor was a confidant, perhaps an accomplice. Arthur looked up then. He looked directly at my car. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply looked, then looked away. He had seen me. He knew I was watching. The game was still on. We were both players. I drove back to Finch House. The sky darkened. I had one more task. I needed to find the blue ledger. It was the one item Arthur named. It was the key. I had seen empty frames. Now I needed the key. I searched my own cottage first. I had left it undisturbed. I looked under the bed. I checked the cupboards. I found nothing. Then I remembered my unpacking. My clothes had been refolded. I checked that drawer. I removed every sweater. At the bottom, it lay flat. A small blue cloth-bound ledger. It was placed there for me. This was the 23rd reveal. The ledger was in my possession. Someone had put it there to implicate me, to entrust me. I took the ledger to the table. I opened the cover. The pages were filled with neat columns. It was a feminine hand. It was a ledger of transactions, but not of money. It listed artwork titles, dates, and codes. The codes matched the journal. Next to each code was a city: New York, London, Vienna. Next to each city was a date, all within 2 years. Next to each date was a museum, or a foundation. The final column was empty. It was labeled verification. This was a restitution ledger. It recorded where items were sent. The empty column awaited proof of successful transfer. Arthur was not hiding art. He was returning it. Systematically, quietly to institutions, across the globe. The blue ledger was the master list, the map of his mission. I held the proof in my hands. I felt profound relief. This was not a story of greed. It was atonement. The lawsuit made sense now. Relatives wanted the art. Arthur ensured it went to cultural homes, or to rightful stewards. He was beating them to the finish line, using his time. I closed the ledger gently. I needed to hide it. But where? It was safest where it was, in my cottage. I returned it to the drawer bottom. I covered it. I walked back to Finch House in light rain. I felt a new calm. I understood my role completely. I was the chronicler. My inventory would show empty spaces, a testament to absence. A good and deliberate absence. I could live with that. I made dinner and ate alone. The house felt different. It felt like a vessel that completed its journey. The rain tapped softly. It was a soothing sound. I went to bed early. I did not barricade my door. I slept deeply for the first time. I dreamed of clean rooms. The morning was quiet and still. I awoke with a clear purpose. I needed to verify one ledger entry, for my own understanding. I chose a painting from the shed photos. Its code was specific. The ledger listed a Vienna Museum Trust. The date was 6 months ago. A simple email inquiry would be my test. I crafted it carefully. I posed as a graduate student. I was researching provenance. I referenced the code and artist. I asked for confirmation. I did not mention Arthur Finch. I sent the email. I went to the library computer. Leo was organizing nearby. "You're digging into the foundation," he said softly. "It's sandy here." "I'm just following the paper trail," I replied. "It's what I do." "Paper trails can lead to cliffs," he noted. He handed me microfilm. "This might interest you. Local newspaper, 1949. Society page." I threaded the film onto the reader. The screen glowed. I scanned through gossip. A small headline caught my eye. "European heiress Eleanor Finch joins Historical Society." There was a photograph. Eleanor stood with society women. She was poised but apart. The caption described a recent transplant. It noted continental elegance. Below was a smaller article about a museum acquisition. The museum acquired a chart collection. The donor was anonymous. The date aligned with Aline's arrival, her first anonymous donation. This was my 24th document. The pattern began decades ago. Philanthropy as a habit, or a form of camouflage. I thanked Leo and left. The gray day felt full of whispers. Mrs. Clark waited on her porch. She beckoned me over. "I heard from my hospice friend," she said without preamble. "Arthur had a fall last night, a minor one. He's home." He refused to stay for observation. Dr. Chen was insistent. This was a new escalation. Time was a tangible pressure. "Should someone check on him?" I asked, feeling duty. "Peter from the museum is with him. He's been there all morning." She studied my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm just tired," I said. "It's a big house." "It's a big asterisk story asterisk," she corrected gently. "Be kind to yourself." Her kindness surprised me. I returned to Finch House. Peter's car was in the driveway. I entered through the kitchen. I heard voices from the sitting room. They were low. "I can't keep making these trips. My uncle is asking questions." That was Peter's voice, anxious. "It's nearly finished. 2 more, then your obligation is complete." Arthur's voice was weak but firm. "Instructions are in the briefcase. I've prepaid the courier. You just need to hand it over." "What if someone tracks it? What if they ask me?" "Refer them to Mr. Thorne. He will handle inquiries." There was a rustle of paper, a sigh from Peter. "Okay, 2 more, but that's it. I have my own life." "You have my gratitude and the agreed-upon consideration." Silence passed. Then Peter's footsteps moved toward the foyer. I slipped into the pantry. I closed the door slightly. Peter passed by, carrying a briefcase. He looked pale. He left through the front door. The car engine started. I waited another minute. Then I emerged. Arthur was still in the sitting room. I stood in the doorway. "Ms. Vance," he said without turning. "Come in. The performance is over." I entered slowly. I took the chair opposite. "You heard," he stated. It was not an accusation. "Enough," I admitted. "You're sending more items out." "The final 2, then the house will be truly empty." He looked at me. His eyes were clouded with pain, but their focus was sharp. "You found the ledger. I knew you would. You are thorough." "It was in my cottage," I said, "not in the house." "A necessary misdirection, for your protection and the ledger." He shifted, wincing. "The lawsuit is about possession. The plaintiffs believe they are rightful heirs to objects they never loved. They see assets. I saw burdens. My mother saw ghosts." He took a slow breath. "She spent her life safeguarding." Not owning, safeguarding until they could go home. This was the quiet confession, the paradox's core. "My job is to inventory what is here," I began. "And you have done it superbly. Your list will show echoes. It will show a man who died with nothing. That is legal truth." "But the moral truth is different," I said softly. "The moral truth is in the ledger, in the empty frames." He gave a slow nod. "The moral truth is for you to keep. I entrust it to you, Alara Vance. You are my witness." This was a monumental shift. He appointed me his chronicler. Not just of objects, but of intent. "Why me?" I asked. The question had burned. "Because you are neutral. You have no stake. Because you understand systems. You respect the story they tell. And because you needed the money." A faint smile touched his lips. "It let you be impartial and committed. A rare combination." I could not argue. He had chosen perfectly. "Your sister is a fine lawyer. Her review was swift." He had anticipated Vicky. Of course he had. "This was a staged play," I said, "with a single audience." "The future," he corrected. "The future is the audience. You are the narrator." He gestured to a box. "For you, open it later. It contains my final instructions and a safety deposit key. The box holds verification documents for the ledger's empty column." You may do with them as you see fit, after I am gone. This was the 25th document, the final pass. I felt the responsibility's weight. It was a solemn weight. I will complete the inventory, I promised. It will be exact. I know you will. He closed his eyes. Now I am very tired. Would you help me upstairs? I helped him rise. His arm was frighteningly light. We walked slowly to the staircase. Each step was an effort. We reached his bedroom. It was sparse and medical. A hospital bed stood near the window. He sat with relief. Thank you, he whispered. The nurse will come at 4. I left him there, resting. The house felt like a chapel. I returned to the sitting room. I picked up the small box. I did not open it yet. I placed it in my bag. I went to the study. I worked for 3 hours. I cataloged the remaining books. My notes were precise. I heard the nurse arrive and depart. The house settled. My phone chimed with a new email. It was from Vienna. The Museum Trust confirmed they held the painting. They provided an image. It matched the photograph. The code was verified. They thanked me for my inquiry. The piece was a permanent loan. The term was specific. It implied a conditional gift. This was the verification, for one entry. The ledger was true. Arthur's mission was real. I printed the email at the library. I placed it in the ledger. One empty column could be filled. It was a start. Over 3 days, Arthur declined. He remained in his room. A hospice nurse was constant now. Her comings were quiet. I focused solely on my work. I finished the study. I moved to the parlor. I avoided the dining room. I saved it for last. Mrs. Clark brought soup. She no longer asked questions. We shared an understanding. On the 4th day, Marcus Thorne arrived. He was impeccably dressed. He introduced himself in the foyer. His handshake was firm. Mr. Finch wishes to see us both, he informed me. At 4. At the time, we went upstairs. Arthur was propped in bed. He looked transparent, but his voice held strength. Marcus, Alara, thank you. He gestured to chairs. This is a final alignment, to ensure our records match. He looked at me. Read the final entry for the dining room. I opened my binder. I read my description aloud. Dining room, east wall, covered in wallpaper. Underlying texture suggests prior hanging. Approximately 7 framed artworks. No artworks presently located. Wall is intact. Arthur nodded slowly. And the attic? Attic storage contains 12 empty wooden crates. Contains 7 empty antique frames. No other items. And the strong room. His gaze was steady. No such room located. Walls are solid. A perfect legal denial. I understood my part. Marcus Thorne recorded my statements. He had a recorder. This is your sworn testimony, he asked formally. It is, I said, a true record of my findings. Arthur produced a signed affidavit. It mirrored my statements. Marcus notarized it. The ritual felt solemn. Thank you, Alara, Arthur said. His voice faded. You have been exceptional. Marcus and I left the room. We stood in the hallway. He has arranged everything, Marcus said quietly. His will is clear. Your final payment comes upon completion, and his passing. He also established a separate fund, a research grant. For provenance work, he thought you might continue. This was a shock, a final generous twist. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say nothing. It was his wish. He admired your professionalism. Marcus left soon after. I was alone. That night, Arthur passed away. The nurse found him at dawn. It was peaceful, she told me. He was ready. I felt a profound stillness. The performance was over. I packed my things from the bedroom. I returned to my cottage. The small box sat on my table. I finally opened it. Inside was a letter and a safe deposit key. The letter was handwritten. The script was shaky. Dear Ms. Vance asterisk. If you read this, the house is empty, and I am gone. The key is for box 114. The documents complete the ledger. They are receipts, agreements, letters of thanks from institutions. You may publish them, you may destroy them, you may keep them. The story is yours to tell now, or not to tell. Thank you for being my witness. Yours asterisk. Arthur Finch. P.S. The house is yours for 1 month. Leave the ledger where found. Instructions were clear. I went to the bank. Box 114 contained a thick folder. It was organized chronologically. Each ledger entry had proof: shipping receipts, transfer agreements. There were letters from museum directors. They expressed gratitude. They spoke of closing historical circles. The language was careful. This was the 26th reveal, the complete, verified archive. Arthur had a network of partners. He did not act alone. I copied every document. I used the library scanner. I returned the originals. I kept the copies. I placed the blue ledger back in my drawer, as instructed. I completed my final report. It was 200 pages. It was a masterpiece of omission. It described emptiness. I sent it to Marcus Thorne. My contract was fulfilled. My final payment arrived. The research grant was established. Vicky flew out to help me pack. She was amazed. You lived a legal thriller, she said. A quiet one. What will you do with the copies? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. They feel sacred. We walked through the empty house. The echoes were loud. Someone will buy this place, Vicky said. They'll paint the wallpaper. They'll never know what was here, or the absence's meaning. That's the point, I said. The absence was the point. We locked the door and drove away. I returned the keys. Mrs. Clark waved from her porch. It was a final wave. I spent my last days in the cottage. I organized notes. Leo invited me for farewell coffee. He gave me a gift. It was a volume on archival ethics. The inscription was kind. I knew he was doing good, Leo said, but he needed a record keeper. Not a friend, a professional. That's what I was, I agreed. Just a professional. But you're leaving as more, he observed. You're a witness. I nodded. That was undeniable. On my final morning, I checked the drawer. The ledger was gone. Someone retrieved it as planned. The loop was closed. I felt no alarm, only completion. Vicky and I drove to the airport. The coastline receded. Back to the real world, she said, merging. Isn't that the real world? I asked. Quiet atonement. It's a part, she conceded. A part most never see. I leaned against the window. I thought of empty frames. I thought of a man sending ghosts home. It was the most meaningful work, and it was for a ghost. The return to my apartment felt surreal. Everything was familiar. Yet I was not the same person. The silence was different. It was a modern, empty silence. It lacked Finch House's density. That quiet had been full of stories. This quiet was just quiet. I unpacked my suitcase slowly. My clothes smelled faintly of wood. I placed Arthur's box on my desk. It commanded the room. I did nothing with it for a week. I allowed myself to breathe. I caught up on mundane tasks. I paid bills and answered emails. My professional website needed updating. I listed my recent project vaguely. Private Estate Inventory, Maine. It was accurate and discreet. The research grant activated automatically. Funds arrived in a dedicated account. The terms were beautifully simple. For study in provenance and restitution. It was a key to a new future. He gave me a path. I enrolled in an online course. It focused on art law. The first module discussed looted art. My heart beat faster. The patterns were hauntingly familiar. Secret transfers, coded ledgers. Arthur's mother was a safeguarder. This was a known historical role. Some individuals hid art from thieves. They waited for safer times. That time never came for her. The burden passed to her son. He spent his life finishing her work. This was my understanding. It was a theory, not proven, but evidence was compelling. I needed to speak to Anya Petrova, the investigator from the card. I found her professional email online. I wrote a careful message. I identified myself as the archivist. I referenced the Vienna photo. I asked for a brief consultation. I attached no documents. Her reply came within 2 hours. It was terse and direct. I know of the Finch case. I can speak tomorrow. We arranged a video call. I prepared my questions. Anya Petrova appeared on time. She had sharp features. "Ms. Vance, your work is concluded." Her accent was subtle. "It is. The inventory is delivered," I said. "And what did you find?" She leaned forward slightly. "I found systematic absence and a blue ledger." She did not look surprised. She gave a slow nod. Arthur Finch was a client, in an advisory capacity only. We never met in person. Communication was through secure channels. He sought guidance on restitution protocols. He wanted correctness. This was the 27th reveal, a professional confirmation. "The lawsuit," I began, "is a nuisance," she finished, "filed by opportunistic cousins. They learned of the family history. They smell treasure. They have no legal standing, but they create delay." Arthur's dispersal was legally sound and morally impeccable. She studied me. "He spoke of you. He said you were meticulous." He needed that, a clean record of the empty vessel. "Your inventory defeats their claim. It shows nothing left." I felt validation. My work had tangible purpose. "What should I do with the verification documents?" I asked. "That is your decision now. You are the archivist. You could donate them. You could publish an article. Or lock them away. Let transactions settle into history. My advice, do nothing for now. Sit with the knowledge. When the right path becomes clear, you will know." Her advice mirrored my instinct. I thanked her. "One more thing," she said. "The house itself. It will be sold. New owners may renovate. They may find things, walled up things. Be prepared." The screen went black. Her warning lingered. I had not considered the house's future. Its walls held secrets. A week later, Marcus Thorne's successor called. Her name was Clara Simmons. "Ms. Vance, the estate proceeds to probate. Your report is foundational. There is a preliminary hearing. Your testimony may be requested. It would be a written deposition only. You would reaffirm." I agreed immediately. I had nothing to hide. "Also," she continued, "we have an offer on Finch House. A cash buyer from New York. They wish to inspect. Given your knowledge, would you be available to join?" She offered a consulting fee. I accepted. I needed to see the house again. I needed goodbye. I flew back to Maine 2 days later. Autumn was deeper. The trees were mostly bare. The sky was pale. Clara Simmons met me at the house. She was formal. The buyers were a couple in their 40s. They were architects. They loved the Victorians' bones. They planned a sensitive restoration. The inspection was thorough. We followed from basement to attic. He noted outdated wiring. He tapped walls. In the dining room, he paused. He ran a hand over the wall. "There's a serious void here," he noted. "Might be a sealed room." The male buyer, David, looked intrigued. "Could we open a section?" Clara nodded cautiously. If proceeding with purchase, yes. The inspector used a utility knife. He cut a square opening. Underneath was not plaster. It was polished wood. It was a door, a perfectly sealed door. This was the 28th reveal, a hidden door. My mind raced. The strong room was off the study. This was something new. "Fascinating," David whispered. "We should see inside," his partner Lena said. The inspector found a recessed latch. He pressed it. The panel clicked. It swung inward smoothly. It revealed a shallow cupboard, floor to ceiling. Inside were not paintings. It was a library of journals. Dozens of them, lined neatly. They matched the garden shed journal. This was Alina Finch's archive, her complete record. Clara looked stunned. This was beyond her knowledge. "This changes nothing legally," she said quickly. "Personal papers." "They convey with property," David agreed. "But we would review." I felt protective anxiety. These were private thoughts. As the prior archivist, I said carefully, I could assist. To ensure no vital documentation about structure or hazards. The buyers agreed. It was sensible. Clara gave a grateful nod. We removed the journals. All 34 of them. We placed them in boxes. I took them to my old cottage. I spent 3 days reading. The journals spanned from 1935 to 1990. They were in German and English. Alina's early entries were youthful. They described gallery life. She wrote of artists and exhibitions. She wrote of her father. Then the entries darkened. The year was 1938. She wrote of secured shipments and trusted couriers. She wrote of lists. Her family was not Jewish, but they were patrons. They used their resources. They smuggled art out. Not to sell, to hold, to protect. This was the 29th document, a chronicle of rescue. The war years were vague. She was in Switzerland, then London. Post-war entries held grief. She lost her family. She saved 74 pieces of art. They were in Swiss vaults. She arrived in America with her son, and a hidden legacy. "Arthur must never know the full weight," she wrote. "It would crush him. I will manage alone. I will find a way." But the task was overwhelming. Legal complexities were a maze. Her first anonymous donation was in 1949. It was a test. She established a pattern. It was camouflage. The bulk remained hidden overseas. She visited yearly. Arthur believed she traveled for health. He did not know. She died before completion. She left a letter of intent, and names of Zurich lawyers, and a half-started ledger. Arthur discovered the truth after her death. He was 40. The journals described his shock. Then his quiet acceptance. "My son has a lawyer's mind," Alina wrote, "and a good heart. He will finish what I started. He will do it better." I closed the final journal. Tears streamed down my face. The full story was here, in her own words. It was a story of burden and of quiet honor. I knew what to do with my copies. They were part of this. I called Clara and the buyers. I requested a meeting. We gathered at a local attorney's office. The journals were on the table. "These are personal diaries," I stated. "They contain sensitive history. They do not affect the title, but contain a secret." I looked at David and Lena. I propose a solution. "I will digitize these journals. I will return the originals. You may keep them, or donate to an archive. In return, I ask for discretion and permission for research." The buyers were thoughtful. They saw the gravity. "We bought a house," Lena said, "not private trauma. We agree to your terms, but we would like to read." I agreed that was fair. We signed a memorandum. I spent a week digitizing. I used the library scanner. Leo assisted in silence. He understood the magnitude. When done, I returned the journals. The buyers sealed the cupboard. They decided to keep it as a feature, a secret library. I had the complete digital archive and Arthur's documents. The two sets completed each other. Mother's intent, son's execution. I flew home with digital drives. They felt heavy. My course gave me a framework. I began writing a paper. It was anonymized, a case study in multi-generational restitution. I used no real names. I used fictional dates. I submitted it to a small journal. It was accepted. The act of writing was processing. It organized chaos. Vicky helped review legal implications. We ensured watertight. "You've become an expert," she observed proudly. "It chose me," I replied. It felt true. Months passed. The probate case settled. The cousins' lawsuit was dismissed. My report was key evidence. The judge noted absence of assets. The case closed. I received a final letter from Marcus. It included the dismissal. He enclosed a personal note from Arthur, written long before. "For the researcher, when work is done, a story is a ghost if forgotten. You have given this one a gentle home. Thank you. AF." I framed the note. I placed it above my computer. The grant allowed meaningful projects. I consulted for small museums. I helped audit collections. I looked for provenance gaps. I found a few troubled pieces. I initiated conversations. It was slow, meticulous work. It felt like honoring a debt. A year after Arthur's death, Anya emailed me. It contained a link. The Maritime Museum announced a new initiative, a center for ethics. The lead donor was anonymous. It was in memory of the Finches. The article mentioned a supporting archive. It included personal papers. I knew this was Marcus's doing, and Anya's guidance. The public story was about ethics. The private truth was restitution. It was a perfect cover. Arthur would have appreciated. I visited the museum website. I saw a rendering. It was a light-filled, transparent space. It contrasted hidden rooms. This was the 30th reveal, a public legacy. I felt a chapter close, a peaceful closing. I continued my work. I built a quiet career. I never spoke publicly of Finch House. I never mentioned the ledger. But his methodology lived on. Meticulous documentation, respect for absence. One day, I audited a university collection. I found a Dutch landscape. Its provenance gap spanned 1938 to 1945. I felt a familiar chill. I began the slow work of research. I contacted foundations. It was a long process. It required patience. During this time, I met a fellow researcher. His field was library science. We shared an interest in ethical cataloging. Our conversations were easy. He understood stories and objects. He respected silence. We became partners, in work and in life. He was the first person I told, the full story. He listened without interruption. He held my hand. "You gave a ghost a voice," he said simply. "That's important work." I realized he was right. My role was not to shout. My role was to listen to silence and understand its language. We visited Maine together. We did not go to Finch House. We stayed in a different town. We walked rocky beaches. I felt no pull to see the Victorian. Its story was not mine. It belonged to new owners, and to trees and salt air. My story was the one I carried, in work and heart. I completed research on the Dutch landscape. It was looted. The university agreed to restitution. The painting returned to heirs. They decided to leave it on loan, as a memorial. The ceremony was small. I stood in the back. I watched the family touch the frame. I saw closure. It was a small circle closing, one of many. I knew my life's work then, to help close circles. Quietly, meticulously, without fanfare, one gap at a time. I thought of Arthur in that moment. I sent silent thanks. He gave me more than money. He gave me purpose. Purpose born from absence, built on empty frames. I went home that evening. I opened my digital archive. I looked at the ledger scan. I looked at Aliner's entries. They were not relics. They were blueprints. I closed the files. I made tea. My partner read in the next room. Soft light spilled. This was my calm resolution. A life of quiet work. A life as a witness. And now a facilitator. The phone did not ring mysteriously. No envelopes slid under. The great project was over. My small one began. It was enough. It was more than enough. I understood the Penelope paradox, the house that paid me. I had disappeared into the work and found myself. The payment was not just money, it was the key. I went to bed feeling peace, the kind after long labor. The story was not forgotten, it was integrated. It lived in my choices, in careful attention, in respect for empty spaces and for ghosts. 5 years passed with gentle consistency. My life found its rhythm. I established a small consulting firm. It was just me and an assistant. We specialized in collection audits for regional museums and families. Many families had old collections. They contained uncomfortable history gaps. My job was to find those gaps and guide ethical resolution. My partner, Ben, supported this completely. He understood its pace. We lived in a modest house. It had a large study. The study was filled with books and light. It was peaceful. The Finch documents remained in a secure vault. I accessed them for reference. One morning, a familiar name appeared. It was from Thorne and Lowe. The email was from Clara Simmons, Marcus Thorne's successor. She requested a confidential consultation. It concerned the Finch estate. My breath caught for a moment. I thought that chapter sealed. I agreed to a secure video call. Clara had formal dignity. Ms. Vance, thank you for your time. A new situation arose. It does not involve litigation. It involves a discovery. The current owners of Finch House renovated. In the master bedroom, they found a small safe behind plaster. It was embedded. This was the 31st reveal, a hidden safe. The safe was not on blueprints. They contacted us. We supervised its opening. It contained one item. She held up an evidence bag. Inside was a sealed envelope. The envelope was yellowed with age. It was addressed to Arthur. It is from Alina Finch. It has never been opened. Arthur never found it, or chose not to open it. As a state archivist, we ask you to witness and assess contents. The request felt like a summons. I could not refuse. I flew to New York the next day. The law offices were imposing. Clara met me in a conference room. The safe's contents lay there. Also present was a neutral historian from a major university. We all wore white cotton gloves. The atmosphere was solemn. A video recorder documented the process. Every step was meticulous. Clara used a letter opener carefully. She slit the envelope's top. She withdrew a single sheet. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was Alina's. I recognized it. We read together in silence. The room held its breath. My dearest Arthur, asterisk. If you read this, you found my last secret. Forgive me. The ledgers document the art. They do not document the greatest gift. The art was never ours. It was a trust. The house was ours. I used our family's wealth to buy it, not proceeds from the collection. That was my first promise. Trust and life were separate. The deed is clean. The house is unburdened. It is yours. I tell you so you know one thing is truly yours. One thing is not a ghost. When you complete our work, sell it. Use the money to live, truly live. Do not be a custodian of empty stones. Go into the world. With all my love and regret. Mother. This was the 30-second document. A mother's confession and wish. Arthur never found this letter. He died believing otherwise. He died believing he had to empty it, to purify the asset. He never knew his mother severed the tie. He never knew freedom. The irony was heartbreaking. He worked to free ghosts. He never realized he was already free of that one burden. Tears welled in my eyes. The historian looked away. Clara placed the letter in a new sleeve. This changes tax history. But it does not change Arthur's actions. He acted from duty. It makes his sacrifice more poignant. Her tone held sadness. What will happen to the letter? I asked, voice thick. It will join the estate archive. It is a vital document. The current owners have no claim, but they should know. I volunteered to tell them. I felt responsibility. Clara agreed. She provided their contact. David and Lena were friends. We had stayed in touch. They sent restoration photos. I called them from my hotel. I explained the safe. I read Aliner's letter over the phone. Silence followed. "Oh, Arthur," Lena whispered. "That poor man." "He thought he was undoing a wrong," David said. "He didn't know." "We have to do something," Lena said, "to honor that. To honor the weight he carried, unnecessarily." An idea formed in my mind. It was simple. "The letter says to sell and live," I said. "Arthur didn't do that. Sale proceeds went to the estate. What if the estate used those funds now to fulfill her wish? To fund someone to live while doing good work?" I heard their smiles. "A fellowship," David said. "The Aliner and Arthur Finch Fellowship," Lena added, "for provenance research." It was perfect. It merged both intentions. Hers for freedom, his for restitution. I presented the idea to Clara. She took it to executors. Legal wheels turned slowly, but they turned with purpose. 9 months later, the fellowship was announced. It was through the museum. It provided a 2-year stipend for researching provenance gaps. The inaugural fellow was a recent graduate. Her name was Sophia. I was asked to serve on the committee. I accepted with pride. At the announcement, I stood beside David and Lena. We looked at the center. The light-filled space the letter helped build. A full-circle moment. Sophia gave a brief speech. She spoke of ethical clarity. She did not know the private story. She did not need to. She only needed to do the work. That was the honor. After, Lena showed me a photo. It was of their dining room. The green wallpaper was gone. The wall was warm white. The hidden cupboard door remained. It was framed as a feature. A small, beautiful cabinet. "We kept her journals there," Lena said. It felt right. We read them all. They changed us. "Our renovation is almost done. We'd love for you to visit." I promised we would. I felt no dread. The house was no longer a secret vessel. It was a home. Ben and I visited the following spring. The transformation was breathtaking. They preserved original details, but filled it with light. Finch House felt joyful. It felt at peace. We had dinner in the dining room. The cabinet door was ajar. I saw the journal spines inside. They were safe. David poured wine. "We toast to Aliner and to Arthur." "To the keepers of ghosts," Lena added softly. We raised our glasses. The moment was sweet. That night, we stayed in a guest room. It was not my old room. I slept soundly. I dreamed of a smiling woman. The next morning, I walked in the garden. It was no longer overgrown. Lena planted a perennial border. Early flowers bloomed. Near the old shed, I saw a new stone bench. A plaque was on it. It read, "For quiet reflection." It was dedicated to Arthur Finch. I sat on the bench for a long time. The sun was warm. I thought about the blue ledger. I wondered where it was. Probably in a vault somewhere. Its purpose served. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a research alert. A new batch of wartime manifests was digitized. They were searchable. One keyword was Aliner's father's gallery. The alert triggered. My heart quickened slightly. I opened the link. The manifest was from a Portuguese line, 1941. It listed cargo. The shipper was a bank. Contents were household goods. A handwritten note listed a case number. It matched Aliner's journal. It was a cross-reference, a shipment she arranged. This was the 33rd reveal, a tangible link. It was not a major discovery, but it was a thread. A thread I could follow, a thread for Sophia. I took a screenshot. I emailed it to myself. This was how the work continued, one document at a time. The past was not locked. It had many small doors. New keys were digitized daily. We just had to look. Ben found me in the garden. He sat beside me. "You have that look," he said. "The researcher's gleam." "I found a thread," I admitted. "A tiny one." "Of course you did." He smiled and took my hand. "It's what you do." We sat in comfortable silence. The legacy was no longer a weight. It was a garden, and it was in bloom. We returned home. Life resumed its calm pace. Sophia began her work with energy. She emailed me weekly updates. She was bright and meticulous. She asked insightful questions. I became a mentor to her. It was a role I cherished. One day, she emailed about a Rhode Island museum. They had a portrait. The artist was Austrian, the subject unknown, donated in 1985. The donor was a trust. The trust's name was unfamiliar. The acquisition date was 1962. That date rang a bell. I searched my digital archive. I searched for 1962. I found an entry. It described a transaction finalized. It was a portrait of a young woman. Elinor acquired it. She placed it into a trust for future transfer. The trust name was the Ethelston Trust. That was Sophia's record. The portrait was one of Elinor's pieces. Arthur missed it. Or it was meant to stay, as a representative piece. This was the 34th reveal, a lost puzzle piece. I connected Sophia with Anya Petrova for guidance. The portrait was not looted. It was sold under duress. The museum agreed to a settlement. They kept it with a plaque. It explained complex history. It honored the journey. Sophia's first success. She was elated. She called me to thank me. Her voice held excitement. "This is why I do this," she said, "to fix connections." "It feels like healing," I agreed, "one stitch at a time." I realized I was no longer just a witness. I was a guide. The cycle continued. Arthur guided me unknowingly. Now I guided Sophia. The fellowship was his final gift. My own consulting work continued to grow. I was asked to speak. I decided to speak about the ethics of absence. I used my case study. I never mentioned names. I spoke of empty frames. I spoke of inventories documenting what was not there, and why. The talk was well received. A woman approached me afterwards. She was older with kind eyes. She was a retired archivist. "Your talk resonated," she said. "I encountered a similar situation. A family in Boston. They had rare books with gaps. The patriarch traveled to Switzerland often. He said for his health." She described familiar patterns. The Swiss trips, anonymous donations. "I think he was doing what you described," she said. "Quiet restitution." I never had courage to ask. I just cataloged. "You've given me a new lens. Thank you." We spoke for a while. She promised to send old notes. This was the work's ripple effect. It validated experiences. It created a quiet community of people who understood absence. I returned home from the conference inspired. Ben made dinner. Over dessert, I told him about the woman, the ripple effect. "You've started a quiet movement," he observed. "A very you movement. No slogans, no marches, just careful work." That was the best compliment. It felt true. Later, I received a package. It was from the archivist. It contained a photocopied inventory from 1978 and a handwritten letter. The inventory listed early printed books. Next to entries were small stars. A note explained. Starred items restituted to Heidelberg Library, 1982. She had known. She left a coded record. She needed someone to understand. Now I did. I added her documents to my vault, not to act, but to honor. They were another testament to quiet history custodians. Years continued to pass. Sophia finished her fellowship. She took a museum job. She now runs a provenance department. She trains a new generation. We have coffee when she visits. We talk about threads. She never asks for the full story. I think she understands. She respects the silence. She is a quiet custodian, too. Ben and I grow our lives. We plant a garden. We adopt a dog. My work is steady and fulfilling. I no longer need the grant. I use it to fund small bursaries, in Sophia's name. The circle keeps expanding, gently, without fanfare. One autumn afternoon, I cleaned my study. I found Arthur's small box. The one with his letter and key. I hadn't opened it in years. I sat at my desk. I reread his note. The story is yours to tell now, or not to tell. I realized I had been telling it, not with words. Through my work, through Sophia, through every gap I helped fill. I told the story by living its principles. That was the only telling. I put the letter back. I placed the box on the shelf. It was a relic now, a touchstone. The phone rang. It was David from Finch House. "Lena and I are expecting a baby," he said, joy clear. "A girl. We're nomming her Alina. We wanted you to know first." Tears of happiness sprang to my eyes. I offered congratulations. "The house is ready for a new story," David said. "A happy one." "It always was," I replied. "It just needed the right chapter." We talked a while longer. I promised a gift. After hanging up, I looked out my window. The evening light was golden. I thought of the little girl. She would grow up there. She would play in the garden. She might find the cabinet. She would ask about the journals. Her parents would tell a story. A story about safeguarding, about kindness and responsibility. They would tell her about Arthur and about Alina. They would tell her about remembering and doing what is right. It would be a gentle story. It would be enough. The full truth would wait, if she ever needed it. I closed my laptop. I went to find Ben. He was preparing dinner. Our dog was at his feet. "Everything okay?" he asked, seeing my expression. "Everything is perfect," I said, and I meant it. The ghosts were at rest. The house had a future. The work continued elsewhere, in quiet rooms and databases. My own life was full, not with secrets but with meaning. I learned some paradoxes are not for solving. They are for living. The Penelope paradox was never a riddle. It was an invitation. An invitation to disappear into work and appear fully as yourself. I set the table for dinner. The ordinary ritual felt sacred. The sun set. The first stars appeared. Another day of quiet witness ended. Another began tomorrow.